This is CG Ruthless Sports. I will be brutally honest. Ain't nothing but being brutally honest. Coming at you with another video.
Ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome former Raiders safety, Detroit Lions safety, and most of all played with the New York Giants, and former Purdue standout, Stuart Schweigert. How's it going, bro?
Hey, what's going on, man? Hey, thanks for having me on. I know we've kind of had a couple of times where the schedule didn't work, so I'm pumped to be on.
Oh, dude, I've been pumped for it for quite some time, man. But speaking of quite some time, man, a lot of people aren't really familiar with you from the time, but describe who you are, man. Tell everybody who you are, man.
Well, so I'm from Saginaw, Michigan. I was a 3-sport athlete in Saginaw, Saginaw Heritage High School. I played football, ran track, and played basketball. Then I went on to Purdue University, where I was a 4-year starter. My freshman year, we won the Big Ten. I was Big Ten as a true freshman. I was Big Ten Freshman of the Year. I led the team in interceptions and tackles. Drew Brees was on that team. Drew Brees was a former teammate of mine. We played the Rose Bowl against Washington. Unfortunately, we didn't win the game, but it was a great experience. Then I went on to play the next year against Washington State in the Sun Bowl, and then Washington again in the Sun Bowl. And then my senior year, we played Georgia in the Capital One Bowl. Played with a lot of great teammates. I want to say my senior year, we had 11 guys. 11 guys drafted in the NFL, 7 of us off defense. Was a 3rd-round pick to the Oakland Raiders, 3rd pick in the 3rd round. Played 4 years for Oakland. I think I started, 54, 55 games out there for Oakland. Finished. Then I went and played for the Redskins, the Giants, finished my NFL career with the Detroit Lions. And then I went on to play 3 seasons in the United Football League for the Omaha Nighthawks, which was a really cool league. Jeff Garcia was actually our quarterback, with linebackers like Cato June, Dante Culpepper was in the league. So it was a lot of former NFL players and coaches in that league. In 2011, I was the United Football League's Defensive Player of the Year. I led the league in interceptions and tackles. Finished my NFL career, I think, with, maybe 380 tackles. I think 4 interceptions. I think 4 forced fumbles, 5 fumble recoveries. So I had a pretty decent career. Then I went on and lived back in Saginaw, Michigan with my family. I married my wife. I married my wife, but I married my girlfriend from Purdue. We've been together for 22 years now, married for 14. I have 4 amazing children. Cameron, who is 14, Emma, who is 9, Alex, who is 5, and then my youngest daughter is 3.5. During that time between when I was finished at 31 till I was 37, I owned an indoor football team called the Saginaw Sting for 4 seasons. We went to 3 championships, won 2 of them. For 2 years, I actually bought the league that the team played in called the Continental Indoor Football League. We had 10 teams in 6 states that I was in charge of. I owned a limousine company during that time. I also had a training business called Impact Training by Stuart Schweigert. Then in 2017, I moved down to about 2015. I started to notice some changes with my decision making, and so I started to get involved in the NFL concussion lawsuit. I had a workers' comp claim out in California. I was also going through some other NFL programs or whatnot. So I had a lot of testing done, and come to find out during those testings, I probably had over 50 to 60 concussions. So, I was struggling with anxiety, depression, PTSD, pain management, not being able to sleep, impulse control, memory, a lot of that stuff. So I started to sell off my businesses, and we moved down. And because of that, I just kind of wanted to focus on my mental health. So we actually moved down to West Lafayette, Indiana, in the Saginaw area. You have Michigan here, you have Detroit, Flint, and Saginaw on I-75. And kind of when the auto industry fell apart, those areas just really the economy fell apart, crime rose, and I wanted the best opportunity for my kids. And down here in West Lafayette, Indiana, I mean, the high school they go to, which is West Lafayette, is number 1 in the state. I think top 5 in the country for education. And my wife's a nurse, so she could get any job she wanted as far as, in the health departments. And I had a radio station down here, 101.7 The Hammer, where we focused on Purdue sports, local sports. I did that for a little while. And then I was actually I stopped doing that. And then I was the facilities coordinator at YMCA. And then again, I started with the mental issues from the concussions. I was struggling with that. So I decided to apply for total and permanent disability, which I was awarded about 2 years ago. So as of right now, I'm just a stay-at-home dad of 4 kids. And it was really cool. About 2 months ago, I was inducted into the Purdue Sports Athletic Hall of Fame. And it was a great accomplishment for me. There's a running back named Leroy Keys that played for Purdue back in the late 60s. And he was twice runner-up for the Heisman his junior and senior year. I think his senior year, he ended up getting beat out by O.J. Simpson. But he was a guy that came back to Purdue, and a very close friend of mine. And it was kind of nice because the Hall of Fame actually was renamed the Leroy Keys Purdue Athletic Hall of Fame. So his family was there for the renaming of it, and we were the first class to get inducted into it. And I'll just read this. This is kind of cool. It says, it says, Hall of Famer, 3 words defined as the best and brightest. In Purdue history, there have been more than 9,250 student athletes, coaches, and administrators. Purdue's Hall of Fame consists of 175 inductees, meaning less than 2% of all Boilermakers are enriched. So it's a pretty elite group. And kind of my last kind of thing I wanted to accomplish on for myself. About 5 or 6 years ago, I kind of make this analogy that I had to bury Stuart Schweigert, the athlete. Those days of me accomplishing something on my own, like, making it to the Super Bowl or becoming a Hall of Famer in the NFL or coaching in the Super Bowl, or just certain things that I wanted to accomplish in my playing career. I had to realize that those days were over with. And I always say I mourned that player. It took me a while to buy, or not buy in, but it took me a while to really know that those times were done. And once that happened, now, I mean, me kind of mentoring some athletes and giving advice to my kids and watching them be successful with it makes me happier than anything I could do individually. But this was kind of my last individual thing I wanted to accomplish, and I've done that. And life's never been better the last 2 years. I mean, me and my wife's relationship is great. My relationship with my kids, but there was a time where for about 4 or 5 years there was a struggle because of, my brain. Basically, you think of doing something and operating and the way you handle things for 33, 34 years, when all of a sudden it switches, and now you don't handle situations the same way you used to. You don't think the same way you used to. You don't. I kind of contribute my brain because there's damage to the prefrontal cortex, and with that damage, my brain's pretty much the brain of a 18 or 19-year-old kid. You kind of like I said, you're impulsive. You don't think of consequences.
You just take the hits. You just take a lot of the hits, a lot of the risk factors, and all that stuff. So when you play this game, it's pretty much like you're putting your health at risk. So the fact that you had some concussions.
Absolutely.
Yeah, the fact that you had some concussions throughout your career, you had to think mentally in the right mind. Maybe it was better for you to step away, and it had to be the toughest decision just to move forward from your playing days. But when you look back at Purdue, man, you had the record for the most interceptions.
Yeah. The former record was held by Rod Woodson, who is a mentor of mine, a close friend of mine, a guy that I respect a ton. The record was 11. I actually tied that my sophomore year, and then I finished it with 17. And one of the other things that I'm really happy, and I also think I think I'm like 7th or 8th all time for tackles there, and I think 2nd all time for safeties for tackles. But one of the things too is I graduated in 3.5 years at Purdue, and with a 3.1 GPA. So that was the other thing. I never had any issues with with schooling or concentration or none of this stuff. And also now when I'm going to do these testings and everything, you're basically kind of doing IQ tests, and I'm struggling with things that I thought, I'm looking back thinking I could have aced these things when I was probably in middle school or in high school. And I'm sitting here struggling with this stuff. So it was a tough transitional period. And really now through therapy, through medication, through a lot of communication with my family and my wife, and understanding and trying to figure out basically how to live a normal life with these new unnormal brain issues. So, but we've got it pretty much figured out now. I'm constantly still it's never something that's over with. So I'm always in kind of a period of learning about new things. And also one thing I took upon myself about 2 years ago was to contact former teammates of mine and friends of mine and see how they're doing. I mean, felt like last year for a time there, it was like every 3 or 4 months I was losing a former teammate or a guy I played against or a guy I played with. And a lot of times it's these guys, they don't know what's going on. Their wives and family don't know what's going on. By that time, 5 or 6 years after they're done is when you start to see some of these issues come up. And, all of a sudden now they're struggling with some money. They're trying to go back and get a regular job, and they can't because, again, they just don't operate the way that, people in a normal workforce operate. And then they kind of seclude themselves and stop talking to people. And that's the worst thing you can do, because they feel like they're the only ones going through it. And there's a lot of guys going through it. So I've tried to reach out to as many people as I can. And 2 years ago, got reassociated really with the Raiders. I hadn't communicated with the Raiders in like 10 years, and I couldn't watch NFL football. And then I finally just decided, I talked to one of my teammates. He said, come back. And the Raiders do a phenomenal job with the alumni. So I've been going back the last 2 years and reconnecting with guys. And it's been amazing to be able to kind of form that network. So that's pretty much kind of from when I started until to kind of catches up here till today.
Yeah, I mean, you've done it all. And I guess you repaired the relationship with the team with the Raiders. So you got a lot of people you work with the network. I've seen you work with a lot of these guys, and we've interacted from time to time. And I've always thought, man, hey, if a guy can do so much and he does support for all the other contents, man, that speaks volume. And plus, you're just more than just a guy that used to play in the NFL. You're a guy that has the mental mindset. Like when you play this game, you played it with an edge, but you knew you were taking the consequences with the risk.
And that's, excuse me, during that time in high school, I missed one game for an ankle. In college, I missed one game for a sprained knee. And in the NFL, I missed one game for a torn calf. So I was a guy that I prided myself on being healthy and taking care of my body. And one of the things is I say, and really back then, that kind of towards the end of my career is when they kind of started to, when that movie came out, when they finally started to kind of recognize that guys were having these issues. I thought a concussion was when you got knocked out, right? Like when you're laying on the turf and they have to come and cart you off. What I didn't think was a concussion when they called it just getting your bell rung, right? I remember I was getting them a lot my third year in the NFL. It was almost every game. And I would have deja vu where I thought I had been there before. And then I would see like sparkles or stars going through my eyes. And I really couldn't see too well. I mean, if the ball was going to fly in the air, I probably couldn't see the ball, but I could come up and make tackles. And I actually had a little sign that I would give to Kirk Morrison, our middle linebacker, where I kind of I'd tap my leg and he knew to kind of hold me up in the huddle so I wasn't swaying like this, because I'd say this about 5%, and this is just kind of my own. It's not I did any studies on this, but 5 or 10% of the NFL makes 5 and 10% of the money, or sorry, 90% of the money. So what I mean by that is the 100 guys that people know, the guys whose jerseys are up in the stores and guys who are, kind of the faces of the team. Those guys are making the huge contracts, right? And the other guys like us, and those guys have job security. So if those guys were to get hurt, they know that when they come back, they're going to get their job back. For the rest of us, if I get a concussion and I tell them I have one, I'm out that game, and then you have to do the protocol. I'm probably out the next game. Well, during that time, my position's up. Someone could come in, and again, I'm not one of those 10%ers that has that job security. So I'm not gonna allow anyone to come in and take my spot. So if I'm not knocked out and I can still play, I'm gonna play. And whereas now, and even back then, you talk to the trainer. It's your trainer sitting there, and he's asking you, "Hey, are you good to go?" And all the questions they're gonna ask, so you can BS it, right?
I mean, at the time, most players didn't want to lose their position, like you said, and the concussions then weren't like monitored as much. It was like if they checked on you for a little bit, you can go. If not, concussions during that time was pretty rare. Like you said, you were dazed up. Like you would have to communicate with your teammate, and he would get the clue. But for you didn't want to lose your job to any other veteran or any other rookie, so you were trying to do your best you can just to stay on the field and say,
And then too, you're thinking, well, if there's issues, I'll deal with. You're in this position where you want to try to play as long as you can, and you're thinking, I'll just worry about that stuff later. So you're gonna you practice so hard, and you all of the preparation for these games. You only get 16 of them during a whole year. So I'm not gonna miss any of those, because the name of the game is to make plays, right? To go out there and show your fans that you appreciate them and put out good performances. And if you're not out there, you're not doing what you want to do. So I was, like I said, I was going to do anything I could to stay out there. And there wasn't that education in what could actually happen from some of these effects. What did it, if I would have known about, a little bit more about what happens, I wouldn't have changed anything. I still would have played. But I think now, like when a guy would go out, because you see a guy at practice, right? Or during the week, and you're thinking, okay, are you going to play this week? No, I'm still, and you're still struggling from something that happened, a week ago, because you have a headache. Like you almost kind of look down on the player, because we're just thinking like, this guy needs to get going here, Whereas now, when they decide if you can play or not, it's a third party. Like, you have the let's say you have the Raiders trainers and you have the 49ers trainers, and they're playing. When a guy up top, there's a group that says, "Hey, I think this guy has a concussion." Well, he comes down and he says, "Hey, you can play or you can't play." It's not up to the player. It's not up to the coaches. It's not up to the trainers. It's this third party. So when that happens, it's a little more understanding, because it's saying like, "Hey, this guy's telling me I can't play." But as a player, if someone's going to give you that option, "Hey, do you think you can play or not?" Every player is going to say, "Yeah, I can play." And they kind of put it in your hand. So back then, if you said you couldn't play, it's like, this guy's saying he can't play because he got his bell rung like 2 weeks ago. And now it takes the players out of it, which I think is good. And also, too, in the lower levels, if you have so many of them, you can't go anymore. So it's to where a player can't look back and go, "Man, I decided not to play. Did I make the right decision or not?" Well, now it's not up to you. So if it happens, it's kind of, you're not going to sit there and have those regrets about it. So I think they're making some advancements to it. But again, football is football. It's a sport that people like, because there is that physicality to it. So you can only make it as safe as much before it doesn't become football anymore.
Oh, absolutely, dude. Like the risk factor, but now they're more cautious about it. Like you said, that there's a third party when it comes to the injuries. It's not up to the coaches or the players. Yes. It could be that third party. Before then, it was more like they would give you the participation if you show up or not.
Yep.
They didn't have none. They didn't double check or none. It was different times. But
I do want to say this too. So, during that time, when I was struggling with stuff, I stopped. I didn't like going out in public. I didn't like to travel. The anxiety, being out where, before, if you're out in public and you hear knuckleheads talking and you can just kind of ignore them and just move on. Well, now for me, I don't have that kind of that filter anymore. I have to say something, and I've gotten myself in situations where, probably I'm creating situations that are unsafe for being out in public. So I stopped going out, and it got to the point where I wasn't socializing. And when you stop socializing, that's when you start to get in your own head and you start to think that you're the only one with these issues. And Docs and Graphic, when he asked me to come on his show, I really didn't know anything about the social media stuff. I mean, I had seen it a little bit, but again, I remember during my career, as a football player, you only talk about the corrections. Like, you don't talk about the good plays you have. You talk about the plays that you need to, that maybe the mistakes that you made and the plays you need to work on. So again, as far as fans go, you don't think of the hundreds or thousands or however many fans that support you. It's the couple fans that were the ones that were talking crap to you, or the ones that would write bad articles about you. So you think that one bad article or one fan represents the whole nation or the whole NFL or whatever. So you're almost kind of embarrassed to go out because you do talk to people and, oh, I never heard of you, or you only played this many years, or you didn't win a Super Bowl. So you just almost stop even talking about it. I didn't wear anything from the Raiders. I didn't do any of that stuff. But when I got on Graf's show and kind of got reintroduced, because I was nervous about doing it. I'm like, man, having people make comments, I'm thinking, dude, people are going to be, and I'm just going to get upset and I'm going to get mad. And it was completely different. So getting on this social media and getting on shows like yours and being able to talk to the nation and talk to fans from other teams, it really saved my life. I mean, it did, because now I can come on here and be social and interact with people and get that interaction without having to leave my house.
You get that normal reaction. You feel like home in a bit because
where I'm not out. I'm safe. I feel comfortable in my house. And 2 years ago, if you were to tell me and you could have this conversation across the computer screen,
I would be thinking the same way too, because I never before during the draft days, man, the interviews were different. But now I get that platform to interview any NFL draft prospects, man. It's like, dude, I never thought of it in so many years, bro. I would have the likes of Julian Peterson. I would have the likes of Sean King and you. Dude, it's like, I can go on, bro. I like to reach for those big names, bro. But you told me you got a couple of guys that you got in mind, bro. What about giving me that assassin George Atkinson, man? I got to get him on, man. That's going to be big.
Yeah, So George is a very close friend of mine. That was one thing cool about the Raiders. And
they got a good history.
That was one thing also too, is when I was drafted, Willie Brown, one of the greatest ever.
Rest in peace.
Yes, thank you. He was a guy, like when I talked about Leroy Keys from Purdue, kind of a guy that was a legend for us. Wasn't like a coach. So you felt like you could go to him, with problems you probably wouldn't talk to with the real coach. Oh, and actually, let me just rewind to another reason you didn't talk about injuries and concussions. You didn't want to have it on your report.
Yeah.
You didn't want to have that on your biography, because when you become a free agent and all of a sudden it comes down to two guys and you're looking at they're looking at your report and you say that you've had a couple concussions, you've had this, you've had that. And then this other guy doesn't have any injuries, which everybody has injuries. It's just, you just don't report them because, again, you're looking at it and you go, well, we're going to take this guy because he's got a healthier background. So guys like Willie Brown were guys that you could come up and maybe talk to a little bit about personal issues. Because, again, you didn't bring up any issues with coaches because they're going to go up and they're going to tell somebody. And then all of a sudden now they're like, hey, man, we might want to get rid of this guy. He's talking about he's depressed. He doesn't want to get up. He's fighting with his girlfriend. He's having all these weird issues. And that just makes you look bad as a player, which is unfortunate. And now, like I said, that's a little bit different. But Willie Brown, so we get drafted on a Saturday, and that Thursday they had us fly out, and we had a full team mini camp. It wasn't It wasn't like this stuff now where it's a rookie mini camp or it's half the team or whatever. This is everybody there. And I remember Willie Brown had all the rookies come in, and it was, I think, just the drafted rookies he had. So 9, 10 of us, and he said, put down your pads, put down your playbooks, and he held up like the Raiders. It was like the history of the Raiders. It was like basically like a little yearbook,
like a tradition, like give you a little pep talk and tell you how it's done and all that type of stuff.
Yeah.
Most veterans, or the people who've been around the legends, like you get guys like you said, Willie Brown. Then you have Ronnie Lott passing knowledge with the Niners.
Yes,
you get one of those guys.
And so he reads it. He says, guys, he says, put your playbooks down. He says, go home, go in your room tonight and study this. He said, this is what's important right now. He said, for one, I want you to read through this and read about the players that had this organization win 3 Super Bowls, the legends. Read about who they are and what they had to do to accomplish those goals. What type of stats did these guys have? What type of careers did these guys have? And he said, secondly, these guys are going to be around here. And he says, when you see these guys, you go up and you pay your respects to these guys. So that always stuck with me. And when you talk about the Raiders, you had Fred Biletnikoff with the wide receivers, and you had Jim Otto in there, and you had, you'd have these guys, George Atkinson and Jack Tatum, and these guys would come back. And I'm just sitting there thinking, if I was at training camp and I'm a safety and I got Jack Tatum there watching practice, because these guys would come and watch practice, right? This guy's watching practice, and I don't come up and just pay my respects to him. How embarrassing that would be for me, and the type of impression he would have on me. So with all of these guys coming back, I was always made sure to pay my respects to the guys that came before. And again, in the NFL, obviously, we're all, as far as the players go, we're under a union, so we're all a team, regardless of what team you play for. Like I was always the guy that during the game, I'm going to play physical and I'm going to play with reckless abandon, but it's going to be all through the rules, right? I'm not going to do anything dirty and try to hurt somebody or do anything past that, because again, this is a profession. I would hate to take some guy out and then now he's not able to provide for his kids. But along with that, I always had a lot of respect for the fans, regardless of where we're going. Because most of the time, I loved road games, man. I loved being, in a stadium where you had 80,000 people just against you, and all you had was your, the guys on your sideline. And I remember during games, fans would say stuff, and I'd interact with the fans, and 99% of the time after the game, those same fans that we were going back and forth with, I go up and, hey, nice game, man, and become friends with them. So getting on here, obviously I started with just kind of Raiders content, but I always love getting, and I try to encourage the Raiders fans and some of the content creators to get other, 49ers content creators and Eagles content creators and Houston content creators, because that way, sometimes when you just get stuck with one team, you kind of get tunnel vision, right? You don't
want to switch it up a little bit. That's what I do with my network. I do the NFC West network with the Cardinal fan. I do one with the Seahawks and the Rams.
Yeah.
We work as a team. I do my best to network with any other fan base, because sometimes I want to switch up and see what's going on. Like, for example, I want to see what's going on with your Raiders, because you're one of those guys that keeps an eye on them and has some good understanding. And speaking of Purdue, man, I've heard some pro days and stuff coming up pretty soon, but I heard that the Niners have met up with the tight end.
With Payne Durham.
Yeah, I've heard some good reviews about him.
I will tell you this: Payne Durham is a stud, man. That dude, he's a close friend of mine. Him and his family. Hey, Alfredo. Him and his family are great people. He's a big kid. Now, I will say this: I watched his combine. He didn't have the best numbers. They were okay, but I don't believe that combine thing. It's
overrated.
Yeah, it's no indication of how a guy's gonna perform as a player. Payne Durham is he is a stud player. He's a kid who prepares. He's a good block. He's a really, really, really good blocking tight end. But he can make plays down the field. He's just a gamer, man. So he's the guy I'd love to be honest with you, I mean, with us kind of getting rid of some of our tight ends, he's a guy that I wouldn't mind the Raiders picking up. And the Purdue, we have Aiden O'Connell, who's a quarterback who really, I mean, Aiden O'Connell is a kid who started off as like the 8th quarterback walk-on, and
kind of like a Steve Young story, I guess.
Yeah, and came out and really performed very well. We have Corey Trice, who's a tall cornerback that we had last season. If you're looking at his kind of stats from last year, he came back from an injury from his junior year, so he didn't play as well as he could have. He was still kind of nursing that injury a little bit, but he's a guy that's played a lot of football. 6 foot. He's all of 6'3". He's fast.
Lengthy quarter, yeah.
Yeah, he's a great corner. Then another guy is Jalen Graham, who's that kind of hybrid outside linebacker / safety type. Another guy who I've been a fan of for a long time, came from Detroit. Again, all of 6'3", about 230, makes plays, great tackler. And then Charlie Jones, a receiver that we had who transferred from Iowa for his 5th year. A guy who came out and just kind of lit the college football world or took it by a storm, man. And he ran a 4.44, 2 4.44s at the combine. I knew he was fast. I didn't know he was that fast. So he's that slot receiver, kind of that Wes Welker type guy, a guy that can make a ton of plays. Obviously, you know, I'm gonna probably, I try to stay as realistic as I can, even though they're Purdue guys. But I really like
to keep it real.
Yeah, I really like these guys that are coming out. I mean, they're legit players. And again, if you watch the combine during their drills, they're talking about somebody else. They're not really highlighting these guys from Purdue. And I get it. I know that Purdue's starting to get a little bit of a name, but they are guys that are going to come in and I think they're going to do really well. So any guy that you get from Purdue, I can guarantee you that they're going to be doing the right thing. They're going to be hard workers. And if they get a shot, they get a chance, they're going to do well. I mean, for instance, Xander Horvath last year was a 7th round running back from Purdue to San Diego Chargers. Dude had 2 touchdowns in his first 2 games, you know, as a 7th round fullback, right?
Oh,
I mean, yeah, he's a guy who's been producing for us, and we've had some guys the last couple of years do really well from Purdue. So
yeah, I remember last year you brought up Carl Karlaftis.
George Karlaftis,
Karlaftis.
City Chiefs, yeah, another guy who had won a Super Bowl, a guy that I wish, with us not having, pick in round 1 or 2, I knew we probably wouldn't have a chance to get him. But David Bell was a receiver last year.
He was solid for Cleveland too.
Yeah. So there are some, but that Payne Durham, you guys would love to have that guy.
Blocking tight end, that's what they look at mostly.
Yep.
And that's what he's done. So I'm looking at the film and I see consistency out of his game. But
I was watching yesterday. It's a podcast where everybody had on Kittle.
Oh, you mean George Kittle?
Yeah, he's your tight end, right, for the 49ers? Yeah, from Iowa. And they had him on, man. That dude was pretty cool. I've always respected him. Anyone coming from the Big Ten, I love, and Iowa produces great tight ends. I was watching him on a show and getting a chance. Here's the thing too, is you give players a platform to show to be able to show the fans who we are as people, right? Because a lot of times, you go to a stadium and you're off. The guys are so far removed from you. A lot of times you're watching them on the Jumbotron. You don't really, we have all these pads on, so you don't really get a chance to see us. So it's not like we're not even human beings, and this allows us to take the helmets off and for people to really see how we are as human beings. And I think that's great, because I think sometimes, again, when you get to meet somebody and you get to make that connection with them, I think it's funner. I don't think if that's a word or not, but it's funner when you know somebody and you watch those guys, it makes the game more enjoyable. You know what I mean? To have that personal connection with them. And for me, getting a chance to meet the fans on a personal level really helped me understand sometimes, because there were times with the Raider Nation where, I'm thinking like these guys are nuts, man. I mean, they're like, I remember my rookie year, we go to Indianapolis, and coming from, Purdue, which is in Indiana, I'm like, I know how the fans are. They're pretty respectable fans, and we're playing the Colts, and I hear these guys just yelling and yelling and yelling. I'm like, man, I didn't realize Colts Indiana fans, were kind of that ruthless or whatever. And then about the third quarter, I finally turn around and there's these two fans getting kicked out for talking trash to us, and they're both wearing Raiders jerseys. And I'm like, here we go. There's Raiders fans getting kicked out of a Colts game for talking trash to the Raiders team, right? And I'm like, what the heck, man? So
it makes sense.
Yeah. I'm like, I know they're passionate, but again, the real Raiders fans, those Raiders fans are thinking that's how Raiders fans are, where you go in, you talk crap, and the real Raiders fans, the real nation, getting a chance to really meet them on here. I got a totally different respect for them, and the passion that you guys have. And when I say you guys, all fans that are going to take time out to do stuff like this. I see why you guys are very passionate, because you put a lot of time into it. And it does become where when we lose or we win, you guys are a part of it. I always say that football is the greatest team sport, because from the owner of the team down to its worst fan, right? Or its lowest fan, every win and loss, they're all a part of it. There's each person has a higher percentage of what they're involved with, but that all comes together. I mean, it really does. That fan support and the management and practice squad guys and everybody has a hand in every win and every loss. So when I was able to come on here and meet the fans, it was great, because I got a better appreciation of why sometimes they are so upset when a team loses, because you guys put a ton of effort into representing the team and being behind the team. And I understand when they lose, you feel like you're getting let down. So it was nice to be able to, again, like this allows us to have these face-to-face conversations with, before there'd be no way to have anything like this. There'd be no way for someone who's not in the media to have a sit-down interview with someone, on an NFL team.
No, I mean, some people just underestimate some of the fans in some perspective, but you got some of the media credentials and all the guys who go their way and go a little extra mile. But like us, man, we just think differently, man. We just passionate about the team, and guys like you who played this game and knows what it's like to be in this situation, because you've had to go through the locker room, the ownership, everything, dude. Like, it had to be something. Like, what was it like to just play for Al Davis, just meeting the guy in person, man? It had to be something.
He obviously, I have a ton of respect for Al Davis. I love Al Davis and his family and everything that they've done for me and for the Raiders and for the NFL and for, he was a trailblazer. I mean, he did things that no other teams were going to do, with hiring minority coaches and putting, like a woman like Amy Trask in positions of power. And he did a lot of things that set trends. And he was a guy who was passionate, a guy who loved the sport, a guy who loved his players. Again, I mean, he gave me an opportunity. I was every year Al kind of has his picks in the draft, and, they could go through the whole entire offseason of draft research, right? Researching all these players and putting these draft boards together. And all of a sudden, Al Davis, it could be during the draft, he comes in and he's like, okay, we're taking this guy. And they're going, we talked about this guy a little bit, but, we had him here, whatever. And I know from my agent that I was kind of Al's pick for that draft. And just knowing that was an honor for me. And here's kind of I want to show you something. Kind of a quick story here.
Yeah, it's a good story to know, man. So I guess he wanted you as the pick. Interesting.
So at the very first mini camp that we had, when I talked about, Willie Brown talking, was after the draft. The last period on Sunday was, like a if the offense scores, camp's over with. If the defense stops them, camp's over with, and that's how we're going to end it. And I I actually finished with an interception. And after we huddled everybody up, because Al Davis he'd go to every practice. He was there at every single practice. We filmed every single individual period, every team period, and he would go through and watch all of that. So it wasn't a surprise to at 10:30, 11 o'clock at night to get a call from a private number, and you answer it, and it's Al Davis asking you, hey, in that red zone period, how come you were so close to the line of scrimmage when you should have been towards the middle of the field or whatever? And I'm thinking, I don't even really remember what play he's talking about, And then so he watched every single thing going on. But after that interception, I heard, Schweigert, and I look and it's Al Davis. And whenever Al Davis calls you over, it's Mr. Davis. Yes, Mr. Davis. He grabbed my jersey, and that at that time he could still walk, without.
That's a good picture right there, man. That's got to be something memorable to have for the remaining of your life.
Yeah, absolutely. So
the football Mavericks, man, the football Maverick, the legendary guy, the pioneer of professional football.
So he grabs that, and I walk like he's using me kind of as balance to walk into the facilities, and he says, he says, Schweigert, that ball always seems to find your hand, and I'm talking with him, and it was a really cool moment. Well, a close friend of mine, he said, Stu, because when I went back my first off season, we had a photographer, Tony. His name, it was kind of funny. His name's Tony Gonzalez, but he was our team photographer.
Oh, name it the tight end.
Yeah. And he gave me a CD of all the pictures he had taken. I mean, I would go to like Myers and print them off and sign them for family and friends and stuff like that. And I signed one for a guy named Joe Wilson. And he said, Stu, you think you could take that back and you think Al Davis would sign it? And I'm like, I don't know. Because I know I had heard that Al doesn't really sign a whole lot of stuff, Could
have been something memorable to have as your.
Well, so I go back and this is an off season. And I go to his secretary's name was Fudgy. And I said, Fudgy, is Al around? And she says, yeah, he's in the office. I said, hey, do you think, I have this picture. I said, do you think he would sign this? It's for a friend of mine. And she says, okay, I'll see. And she, she gets on the phone and she says, yeah, he'll see you now. And these big double doors, and I open up his doors, and his office is, probably about the size, probably a little bit bigger than this basement, and everything is white. The carpets are white. The walls are white, ceiling's white, all the furniture is like black marble, black leather. And he says, Schweigert, come and sit down. And I sit down, and as I'm sitting down, he says, Stuart Schweigert, Heritage High School, 1,650 rushing yards, 25 rushing touchdowns, league MVP, 100-meter dash, state champion, junior. And he's going over like my high school. He's telling me my high school stats. And it wasn't like he was sitting there like knowing I was going to come into this office. Like he had this like in the top of his head.
Like a football geek.
Yeah, I'm like, here I am. I'm Stuart Schweigert. This guy's coached some of the greatest players ever, and he knows my high school stats. So that's just he was very passionate. I think towards the end, though, it just got to the point where, again, he owns the team because he loves football, and he was a former coach, so he wanted things the way he wanted them ran. He's going to bring in a coach, and really, when you bring in a coach, you got to let them coach. You got to give them the freedom to do what they want. As the owner, you have the trump card to veto anything, but I know, like, for instance, we would come in and here, let me show you. Oh, I don't have it with me here, but I have all my old game plans. So majority of your game plan goes in Wednesday and Thursday. Those are like when you're putting in, these are the plays that we're going to run and why we're going to run them. Friday practice, that's just kind of that's just kind of a refresher, kind of just, you're not adding anything in. You're just doing review, getting ready to jump on the plane and head out. Well, Al Davis would have his meeting with Rob Ryan and his defensive coaching staff Thursday night. So we come in Friday, sometimes Friday morning, And, Rob would be up there and he said, I met with Al last night, and he'd pull up our call sheet with all our calls. And he'd say, all right, we're not running this. We're not running this. We're going to run this, but we're going to call it this. We're going to use this in this situation, but don't let anyone know we're actually using that. So Al would come in and kind of dictate what the coach, like the plays we were going to run. And I think that creates some controversy. I think that creates to where the coordinator is thinking like, well, it doesn't really matter what I do because Al's just going to change it anyways. And I think that's kind of where he may have gotten in trouble a little bit. I think because of that, towards the end, some of the coaches he hired were guys that he could kind of control a little bit more because
he was like the mad scientist trying to put in the ideas and all that.
And again, it wasn't like it was a deal where he was doing that out of spite or what. He was doing it because he thought what he was doing was the best to help the Raiders win. I mean, that was his, everything he did was to make the Raiders great. But just towards the end, I think it just got to where you got to move on a little bit from some of your ideas. I mean, on defense, I was pretty much just stuck 15, 20 yards deep in the middle of the field with our corners manned up, and that can work. But in today's game, you still have to be able to make some adjustments. And I think that was where he may have not been so apt to move along with some of the changing times. And sometimes when things, I think, weren't working for us, he wanted to stick with it because it had worked in the past. But again, a guy I have a ton of respect for, I love, and what his family, and I'm a huge supporter of Mark Davis and when he's done moving the team. And so we'll tell some stories some other time when I come on, but I have some really good Al Davis stories.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure maybe in the near future when it comes on your perfect timing. But we were about to cover the Jimmy Garoppolo if you got maybe a little extra time for that. If that's
I got probably about a couple minutes here. Yeah.
Okay, let's cover the Jimmy Garoppolo because I know this was a signing that some Raider fans weren't expecting, and I was kind of like saying I can see this happening because of the fit with Josh McDaniels.
So I had actually said that he was a guy that kept coming up in my head when I thought of quarterbacks that we could get. I just looked at it thinking this looks like something that could happen, with McDaniels, and then just again with us taking a great competitor from the Niners. I love it. I absolutely love the pick. I was, as far as Derek Carr goes, I support all the players. There's some I like more than others. I just, with Derek Carr, here's a guy that for 10 years, I don't know how a player who can be there for 10 years, go through all those different coaching changes and continues to stay there, and he's never won a playoff game. Typically to have that type of job security, man, to be able to last through all that stuff, it's like this guy must be he is just such a great player for that team. I'm not saying he wasn't a great player, because if you look at statistically, he in the record books, he's considered one of the top, but that's because he was there so long.
Yeah,
and he'll play, 85% of the time he's making great throws, great plays, but then sometimes he'll make a play where you're like, what was that? Like that just came out of nowhere, and it's just like that little instability, like that always scared me, because no matter how well he was playing, I'm thinking, dude, if he does one of those plays where you're going, what the hell was he doing? It could be the difference of a game. But I'm looking at it going, 10 years, they paid the guy very well, always had his back, always never was negative towards him. And as soon as the Raiders make a decision just to, hey, you know what, we're gonna try Stidham here the last 2 games of the year, not being negative to him in the media, just saying, hey, we're gonna take a look at this direction. What's the guy do? He leaves. Even though he's under contract, even though that he could be there he talks about how he's this great team guy, he could still be there being a backup towards Stidham, helping his team, being another eye on the sideline. And what if Stidham goes out there and gets hurt? He could be right back there in the game and continue being the starter. And that really kind of showed his true character. So that's the last I want to talk about Carr. So when Garoppolo comes, to me, I do want to say this too. In the NFL, there's a certain standard you hold yourself to. The NFL is a brutal, tough sport, and there's a certain way you conduct yourself. There's a certain type of attitude you have to have. On top of that, when you play for the Raiders, there's another standard that you're kind of held to as far as being a guy who the Raiders have that tradition of kind of being outlaws and this and that. And Carr was our head of our team, right? He was our representative. And when he was up on the stage, I don't know what it was, doing post-game interviews, week 13 or 14 or whatnot, and he's up there crying, and I cry in the locker room. I'm an emotional guy, but there's certain things you keep private with your teammates, and there's other things that you, as a professional in the league, and as a quarterback and as a leader of the Raiders, to be up there and kind of pouting and whining, it just doesn't look good at all.
Yeah, I mean, emotional for some players. It's not normal for everybody else. But when he said that I put a lot of this for this team and it's not good enough, and I mean, to be fair with him, he didn't have much of a great defense.
Well, I mean, I don't want to get into all that right now.
Let's get on to Jimmy Garoppolo, man.
Because our defense as far as they put our team in positions to win those games. They did. They gave us a chance. They definitely gave us a chance. So, but again, I'm not saying anything bad about being emotional. Like I said, I cry when I'm happy. I mean, I cried many times. I'd get so emotional before games, I'd cry just to get fucking ready, right? But again, you need to do things in a certain way. When I saw Jimmy come in and do his interviews, his welcome stuff, to me, he's a Raiders quarterback. He's the guy that carries that type of attitude, carries that kind of swagger a little bit as a guy that I think represents the Raiders very well. A guy that we need, a guy that I think is a guy that players are going to like, teammates are going to like. I think just the fans are going to love him, the environment that he's in. I've respected him as a player. I mean, I think he's a guy who has the talent level to do it. He's a guy who has the moxie to do it. I think he's a guy who wears his emotion on his sleeve. I think he's a guy that, this is what I do good. This is what I do bad. And I think him getting back with McDaniels, I think that's a comfort level both for McDaniels and him. I don't think McDaniels and Carr really meshed as well as they should have. And right now, I think these guys have a great relationship. And I think I mean, obviously right now, everything's positive. There's going to be some negative things that come to it, but I'm excited, man. I'm a Jimmy G fan, man. I was a Jimmy G fan of him because, again, he's a guy that I would like to hang out with. He's a guy that I think if he was on my team, he'd be a guy that I'd like to go, to be a friend of mine. And that's how I kind of judge how I like teammates is this a guy that I would like to hang out with, and I think he is going to be. He represents the Las Vegas Raiders very well. He's a guy that I think is a perfect fit for us. Now, could he go out?
Durability's been his issue, but other than that, 70% of his games he's been winning, like consistently. Like, I mean, what else can you expect from a quarterback?
Yeah, well, let me ask you this. I mean, you know about him better than I do. What's your take on him? How do you feel about the guy?
Proven winner, just doesn't win the big one, but when you give him the better talent around him and he can stay healthy, this guy can win you games consistently. That's what makes Jimmy so good in the rest of the way, bro. It's like if you give him the talent, you give him the supporting cast, this guy's gonna ball out. And I thought when you guys got rid of Waller, I thought that was the dumbest move, like, to be honest. But you guys got two tight ends. You got Austin Hooper and OJ Howard. I don't know, dude. Like, I think something's going on with McDaniels. But hey, I'd like to give a shout out to your boy Doxson, man. Dox is in the chat.
Oh, hey, what's up, Dox? Good to see you, brother. It's funny that you bring in Docs as you talk about Waller. I've had my issues with Waller, and you talk about someone who's injury prone. The last couple of years, he's been on the sideline a lot, and all he's done during his time, instead of just being quiet, grinding, and getting back healthy, he's a guy that's always been complaining, wanting this, wanting that, and then when you give him a chance to show off what he can do, he's had some games where he's lost some games for us. So I'm completely fine with him going. And when I look at Jimmy G, I mean, I got to say he's got some weapons, right? I mean, if you look,
the weapons are outstanding. Like you got the receivers,
yep.
2 tight ends.
Yep.
As for anything better.
Yeah, and then with our running back and our offensive line getting better, and then adding some guys around, so I think Mark's going to give him every opportunity to be the best that he can be. So again, I'm excited. I'm very very excited to have him come in and see what he can do.
Yeah, for sure, man. Hey, we'll definitely keep you posted, man, for maybe down the road, man. I know you probably got some stuff to do, but hey, it's been fun to chit chat with you.
Yeah, I definitely I love what you do. I love the content that you create. I love the fact that you give guys a platform to one, introduce ourselves as human beings, right? Like it's not always about football, you know. Sometimes
outside of football is what I
I think some of these shows it's you know, it's like how long and how much longer can we talk about, well, what if we draft this guy? What if we do this and that? And it's like, man, let's maybe talk about and again, as a fan base, I encourage, I kind of give like I told the Raiders fan base here is no other teams. You know, sometimes they go, I don't care about other teams, I'm a Raiders fan. It goes, well, the more you know about other teams, the better Raiders fan you can be, because I think when these teams would come in and it's, hey, are the Raiders going to win? Yeah, we want the Raiders to win every game. Is it going to happen? No. But I think when you know the other teams a little bit more, you can give a better evaluation of what you think is going to happen in that game. So I encourage all the fans, if you are, you have your base team, but go on and look at some other content creators, because those guys are going to know, like, you know, the 49ers. I mean, I know a little bit about them, but if I'm going to do a show and the Raiders are playing the 49ers,
you want my info.
I want your info. Yeah, I want your evaluation. And sometimes it's nice just to have someone else come on and say, hey, what do you think about what the Raiders are doing? Seeing an outside view.
Oh, yeah. Outside looking in, I think what the Raiders are building with Jimmy Garoppolo is they're building that formula. Like, you know, if it worked in New England with him, why not with Las Vegas? If it's worked with San Francisco, it's all about building this offense. Like, I think McDaniels can build up his strength. Like, you know, Shanahan did the same thing. Yep. I think it's going to probably be the same, but the question is durability, man. Can the guy stay healthy?
Well, I will say this. One of the things that I got a little crap from my Raiders fans, because I got back into, you know, one of the things I wanted to do was to get back into like some hobbies and whatnot. And one of my things I got back into was playing Madden. And when I went online, I was actually my team I was using was the 49ers. So I told the Raiders that. They're like, what the hell? And I'm like, so I have been using the Raiders, but I do use the 49ers offense and defense. But I used the 49ers at first because their defense was so good. And that's whenever I'm picking a team, man, I really
based by their talent wise. Yeah.
I loved your guys' defense. I thought you guys have a very, very, very good team. I liked watching you guys. So I have respect for the 49ers. I mean, I have respect for all the teams. I mean,
Keith Lewis was a good one you liked.
Oh yeah, absolutely, man. You know, and like I said, I played with Jeff Garcia, man, and Jeff Garcia was a great teammate. And obviously, you know, Ronnie Lott was a guy that I actually have some interviews where Ronnie Lott's given me some praise after one of the games, which was really cool. So I always enjoyed the 49ers, and I'd probably say the team that probably irks me the most is probably the Kansas City Chiefs, I guess. I mean, but again, I guess when it comes down to it, if the team's going to win and it's not our team, I'd like it to be a team from our division. At least I think it gives the division credibility and stuff like that. So it's just like during bowl games, I always want anybody from the Big Ten to do well. So, but again, no, yeah, I told that, and then I got some pretty big flack for it. So now I do strictly just use the Raiders now when I play.
Because you've been getting caught up on that stuff. Yeah, I don't blame you, man. I don't blame you. But in all seriously, bro, it was fun, bro.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah, anytime, bro. We were going with the mental health stuff. We were going a little bit of all the other stuff, and it went on for like almost an hour, bro.
I will say this, just so you know, and I do go on tangents, so we might start talking about one thing and end up on another. But
that's fine with me.
I think that's a good. I really do. I think that's a good change up because, again, sometimes you can only talk so much about the football side of it, and but again, I appreciate you having me on, and we'll definitely do this again. And I'd love to have you on my show as well sometime.
Yeah, send me an invite or send me the link next time. Maybe I'll jump on your show some other time.
Definitely.
All right, bro. Have a good one. For everybody else, thanks for tuning in. This is former Raiders safety and former Purdue standout Stuart Schweigert. Go check out his channel. Tell everybody where they can find your channel.
It's just Stuart Schweigert on YouTube. My other hand, I do have a Instagram. I do have let's see here. Let me look. I have my Instagram is Stuart Schweigert 30. That's STUART SCHWEIGERT. Then the number 30. My Facebook is just Stuart Schweigert, and then my Twitter is Stuart Schweigert at Thy Butcher 9. So THYBUTCHER 9. And and I sometimes I'll talk football, sometimes I'll talk whatever. I mean, I love having on different subjects, talking about life, talking about I like
everything
fringe, everything. Yeah, everything, man. So
yeah, everything in general. Like you even had some hangouts sometimes, even though it's majority of the Raiders, but sometimes you just go in there to chit chat. They'll just
and again, I love if anybody else has. Again, this is my free time here. I mean, with my different issues, again, like where I don't go out a lot. I am with my family quite a bit. This is my opportunity to kind of go out. This is my social life. So if anybody else ever reach out to me, man, I love coming on people's shows. It just doesn't have to be about Raiders. It can be about, college football, pro football, whatever it is.
Too, or whatever.
Yeah, anything. So again, I appreciate you having me on, man.
Yeah, anytime, bro. And thank you, Stu, for tuning in on the show. And it's looking forward to the near future, man. We'll definitely catch up.
Sounds good, man.